There's no words. I mean, there's going to have to be words because we got a show to do, but there are no words for this Buffalo Sabres team. 9-3 over Toronto. Let's talk about it here on Locked On Sabres.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. 9 again. This time for the good guys. 9-3 Sabres over the Toronto Maple Leafs. I can't help but laugh. I mean, this team is hysterical. They are truly hilarious. I don't know how to talk about them. I don't know what to feel about this team. Am I supposed to feel great after they win 9-3 and sent what? You'd want to say that crowd was 75-25 Leaf fans to Sabre fans? Then okay, I'd be on board with that. And you might want to say 11,000 Leaf fans back over the Peace Bridge, the 2-hour drive up the QEW. Disappointed. That's nice. I love that. You quieted the Go Leafs Go chants pretty quickly. But it just adds to the frustration for some reason of we feel like it's in there. And they show us once in a while against great teams that it is in there. That's one thing we'll try to explain, by the way, is what the heck with they beat great teams and they lose to terrible teams. A lot to get to on today's show. And we'll take a quick look at what's ahead this weekend and next week as the Sabres try to climb back into the playoff race, 7 points out of a playoff spot as it stands today. This episode, remember, you can chime in on the podcast or more good banter back and forth during the Sabres and Leafs game. It was an exciting group chat on Thursday night. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you want to jump on the Locked On Sabres group chat text line. We also just sent out a news alert to our texters that to our sorties that Luukkonen is in goal in the starter's net at practice on Friday, which would indicate he is the starting goaltender on Saturday against the Rangers. But we will see and talk about that a little bit later on. The Sabres and Leafs, I mean, they've played a lot of classic games. They put a lot of back and forth affairs. The Sabres have had a lot of success against Toronto. In fact, during the Sabres playoff drought, they have a better record against only one other divisional team than the Maple Leafs. Want to guess it? Montreal. The Sabres during the playoff drought have a 23-17-7 record against Montreal. That's a 56% point percentage. That is number one of their 8-7 division opponents. The Leafs are two. They have a better record against Toronto than Detroit, than Ottawa, than both of the Florida teams, and, of course, Boston. The Sabres against the Leafs during the playoff drought are 24-19-6. That's a 55% win percentage. That is far better than their normal win percentage or point percentage during the drought. They play well against Toronto, and they, in particular, play well at home against Toronto, which is also pretty amazing. If you split up the splits of that one, and you look at the home record, the Sabres are 16-6-2. 16-6-2. A 70% point percentage against Toronto. It is by far the best team they play at home. Maybe there's something to that. Toronto comes in and fills up the building, and that fires the Sabres up. They take it personally. You know what? Maybe. I'm just saying. I'm not usually one that thinks there's extra effort one game to the next, at least in a detrimental way. But maybe the Leafs fans come in and the Sabres take it personal, and it fires them up, and they play better on the ice. The record says that 16-6-2. And in this one, they embarrassed the Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs should be embarrassed because that's not a good hockey team. I still believe right now this is not a good Sabres hockey team. And they let the Sabres run them over. Now, we'll get to more stuff about why I think that's a signal to Don Granado and the rest of the Sabres organization for how they should play going forward. And we have actually Granado talking about that to get to. But that game, did anyone think that it was about to get off the rails in a bad way? So Jordan Greenway scores 2:27 into the game on a goal that had no business going in. The Sabres got a little lucky that Ilya Samsonov decided to take the night off in the Toronto net. Greenway with a wrist shot from way out that had no business going in finds its way in. Now, to be fair, Austin Matthews scored a goal almost immediately after, only a couple minutes later, that Devin Levi had no business letting in, but he did. And then Max Domi scores on the power play. So it is 2-1 about midway through the first. And everybody that I was watching the game with went, oh, here we go. Here comes the barrage of goals against Devin Levi. They did, the Sabres to their credit, put a lid on that pretty quickly. Owen Power scoring only a minute and 5 later, and I sent a text to our group chat right after that happened. They got a little lucky. Zach Benson, in particular, who I thought had another great game, by the way, got a little lucky because he made one too many passes, and he definitely shouldn't have made the last pass. He had almost the whole net to shoot at, tried to pass it to nobody. There was nobody there, but he got lucky that it went off a Toronto skate, came back out into the slot, and Owen Power, a nice pinch by him to be ready to jump up into the play, and he backhands it into an empty net. That was only a minute after Max Domi had scored, and it was 2-2 just like that. And it did take Jeff Skinner much longer to get his first back from injury in the first period. And you had a 5-goal first period with the Sabres leaving 3-2, and they was off to the races after that. The Sabres won the rest of the game in periods 2 and 3, 6-1. Dahlin on the power play. Thompson, that one, it's a nice shot. You probably want your goalie to save that if you're the Leafs. Hit him in the glove and dribbled in. Kyle Okposo. Gotta give some credit to Okposo. He gets 2 on the night, finished it off with a bit of a lucky goal at the end. The shorthanded goal he scored to make it 6-3, which really was the dagger, right? Like it a little bit of comfort because, up 2 on Toronto, the way the Sabres have played as of late, I didn't feel that comfortable. I didn't feel like they had the game. They could very easily give up a 2-goal game with 50 minutes to play against Toronto. Not 50, 30. But Okposo shorthanded roars down the ice, and a faster player, JJ Peterka, clean cut breakaway, right? Okposo, you saw him racing down the ice, right? That guy does not have his feet anymore. He is a very slow player. Like, this is going to be it for Kyle Okposo. This is going to be it. He doesn't have the feet. He doesn't have the speed to keep up anymore to the level that you want. But, big but coming. You do see why the guy's been in the NHL so long and why, even with no speed, he is on pace for almost 20 goals. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? Why is that? Because it's not the skating. He's still got the shot. He's still got the finish ability. What a rip. Coming down the left wing, he had to shoot it out from a little further than I'm sure he wanted because he didn't have the speed to get to the breakaway. But it didn't matter. He roofed it over Samsonov, which I believe was the goal that got him pulled, unless I'm one off. I don't have it on the chart here. Maybe the Thompson goal was the one that got him pulled. Okposo might have been on Martin Jones, now that I'm thinking back to it. But what a shot by Kyle Okposo. Deserved that one. And you do still see that there is still skill in there. He almost scored a couple minutes later on a forehand backhand move. So good game by the captain. And he was fired up after that goal because, listen, the Sabres players talked about it after the game. By the way, real quick, Jack Quinn, great pass by JJ Peterka. Nice to see Quinn get his first of the year. Skinner scoring again on a pretty tic-tac-toe play with Tage and Tuck. And then Okposo just kind of whips it around to get the 9-3 goal. And that was destiny. They had to get 9. They scored 9 on the let 9 in on Tuesday, and it got to be 8, and you knew they had to get 9, and they did. The players after the game, including Rasmus Dahlin, spoke and were vocal about playing that game for Don Granado. And it's why on my same game parlay, which sorry to say, we didn't hit. And only because I got the wrong goal scorer. I put Dylan Cousins in there and 9 goals and no Dylan Cousins. That's tough. But what I felt, the strongest leg I felt about my parlay was the Sabres covering the +1.5 on the puck line, because I thought they would come out with their hair on fire to play for Don Granado because they love Don Granado. And it's not a surprise to me at all that Rasmus Dahlin comes right out after the game ends and tells everybody that was for Don. That we heard those Fire Granado chants in the crowd on Tuesday. We took that personally, and we wanted to go out there and show everybody it's not on Don. And that, I thought, was what had them playing with such energy and speed and skill. Plus, as I mentioned, the little juice that you get with Toronto taking over the building. So, hey, listen, Toronto fans, if you told me the Toronto fans are going to take over the building every time that they play the Sabres, but the Sabres are going to win 70% of their games against them, I'd sign up for that. I would sign on the dotted line for that. So, all in all, a great game overall. Looking at some of the other stats in this game, the Sabres outshot Toronto 34-27. So Devin Levi comes away with 24 saves on 27 shots. Jeff Skinner, the game's #1 star. Alex Tuch with 4 assists, the game's #2 star. And Kyle Okposo with 2 goals is the game's #3 star. When we come back, the bigger picture. What in the hell is this hockey team? How do we judge them? How do we analyze them? That's coming up next here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience with brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and plenty more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. 9-3 Sabres over the Maple Leafs. 14-17-3. What are we to do with this team? What do we do with it? I don't know. I don't know what to think of them. I don't even know whether it's right to say, hey, that's what they're capable of, what they did to Toronto. Because you think, watching that one game, hey, this team's capable of a lot more, of being in the playoffs, of competing for divisions, that they are capable of a lot more. But listen, when you have a 30-plus game sample size, you get a good idea of what a team is. And I know injuries, right? Jack Quinn's only been back for a couple of games, and they missed Skinner for a couple of games, and Greenway had been out, and Tage missed some time, and Tuch missed some time. Injuries are a legitimate excuse to some degree. Not all of it, but to some degree. But it's not a team that I think it's right to say, well, that's what they should look like every night. I mean, of course, they shouldn't score 9 every night, but they should look like that, outplaying teams like Toronto. I don't subscribe to that. I think they can do that in spurts, but I still think this team lacks the depth, but even more so, the high-end talent to look like that every night. I trust Austin Matthews to show up every night because he is a truly elite centerman and has been since day one. He showed up, was that immediately, and that has been that throughout. Mitch Marner, same thing. Was elite right away, has been since. William Nylander was elite right away, has been since. Like, all these guys just showed up, were great, that was it. John Tavares, of course, going further back, is the same thing. The more I watch the Sabres, the more I see their top 6, top 9, maybe just the whole forward group, taking turns. A lot of taking turns. And this is why I think they are a team that can look incredible and beat the best teams in the league, like Toronto twice now, like Boston, like Vegas, like the Rangers, like Colorado. They've beaten some of the best teams in the league, most of the best teams in the league. They have defeated, but they also lose to Columbus. They lose to Montreal. They lose to Detroit. They lose to St. Louis. They lose to Pittsburgh, who's been horrible this year. They lose to Jersey, who had a struggle early on in the year. They lose to Calgary. How do they look like that? Well, I really do think watching this season, Tage Thompson doesn't look like a superstar. Straight up. Tage Thompson doesn't look like a superstar. And maybe that's injury. I hope it is. He's playing more right now like the 35 goal scorer that he was, 38 goal scorer, I should say, that he was 2 years ago, which, by the way, is really good. Like, that's really good. A 38 goal scorer is far better than anything we ever dreamed of Tage Thompson once upon a time. But is it right to think he's a 50 goal scorer? Because that's Matthews. That's one of the league's best. That's not just a really damn good player. You are one of the best in the sport. And I don't see Matthews had a down year last year. I should say that right out the front. So it's not impossible. But Crosby doesn't have years like this that Tage is having. Ovechkin, up until age 38, doesn't have years like that. I mean, maybe one in a 10-year career. But I'm wondering what Tage is. I'm wondering what Cousins is. I'm wondering what Tuck is on this team on a first line. Because last year gave you a look at it over 82 games, but you can't judge them for their careers off one season. And I feel like we still are in the unknown of what are all these guys year to year to year to year to year. There's not enough years together to know the answer. And it is possible to me that they simply just don't have enough high-end talent. They don't have enough superstar talent. I mean, if I could rewind way back to the tank, why was that an idea that caught on in the first place? It was Sabres had some really good players for a long time between Briere and Drury and the tank. Had some nice players. Derek Roy was a good hockey player. Tim Connolly was a good hockey player. Jason Pominville and Thomas Vanek were really good hockey players. They didn't have any superstars. They didn't have any elite players. None. Miller, their best player was their goaltender. And even Miller wasn't like the best goalie in hockey. So that team realized, hey, we're hitting our head in the ceiling because we just don't have enough high-end skill. That's it. That's the answer. So they tried to go out and get it with Eichel. This team right now, when Thompson's not looking like that, it's really only Dahlin. And to Dahlin's credit, he does that. I mean, he shows up every night, and he looks like a superstar every night. He does not take a night off. There's no off. His off game, he still looks like a top-tier defenseman. And last night, you saw him control the defensive zone. You saw him score on the power play. He's up to 9 goals, by the way, which is number 1 among defensemen in the NHL. And he's back to being, he's not like a Norris favorite, but he's a contender early on in the season here. Dahlin is that player. But the other guys that would be asked to be that haven't been. Power, I said it. Hey, maybe year 2 is when he takes the Victor Hedman jump, which I still think is in there. Can he be a Victor Hedman? That is not happening. That has not happened. Dylan Cousins, is there another step for him? I mentioned that is, hey, with last year, with 2 rookies, he had 30-plus goals and 70 points. Well, if those 2 next to him take steps forward, well, then maybe Cousins is a 90-point player. And that has not happened. In fact, it's gone the complete opposite direction. Jack Quinn, JJ Peterka, books out on, or the jury's out on them. But not to be an elite guy, not to be on the Nathan McKinnon level, not to be on the, I don't want to just keep using Crosby because there's players between Crosby and Jack Quinn, a lot of them that are still really good hockey players. Johnny Gaudreau, where's a guy on the team that has that level? Because you need like 3 of those guys minimum. Toronto's got 3 of them. They can't even win in the playoffs. Boston's has had 3 of those guys, right? McAvoy is an elite defenseman, and Marchand and Pastrnak, like they've got that. All of these teams have like 3 of them, at least. Colorado might have 5, which is why I think so highly of them. Edmonton has 2, but one of them almost counts as 3. It's just kind of an overall thought for me that as we try to explain, this doesn't have to be right, because I think why people think they're confusing right now as a hockey team is it's hard to pin down an answer as to why do they beat great teams? Why do they lose to bad teams? Why do they have the record they do when they have all this talent? Well, for me, I'm starting to wonder how much talent do they really have? It's nice, it's young, but when you compare it to other teams and you look at the elite top end talent, right now, this hockey team doesn't have it. It's just Darlene. And until Tage Thompson gets back to that, which I'm still very optimistic he will, but until that happens, they only have one guy doing it. Timeout here. When we come back, what's ahead for the Buffalo Sabres? Real quick, was there anything I wanted to get to? Oh, very quickly, before I get to what's ahead, I did want to mention Don Granado's comments on the Sabres and the style of play. And this, I think, also factors into why they've looked the way they've looked. I think they really need to get back to the way of, we've said this, they need to get back to the style that they had been playing. And Granado acknowledged that last night, said they are discussing going back to what they did last season with their style of play and then deal with whatever issues come up defensively and deal with it as it comes. They should have done that a month ago. Should have done that 2 months ago. Get back to playing free, fun hockey. Your players like it. It's the way to get that elite talent out of guys like Tage Thompson and maximize it. And you know what? The downside is you're going to make your goaltender's job incredibly hard. But so be it. I think that's when the Sabres are at their best. And Devin Levi and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, just come on, pray for them. Hope they can step up and just have even reasonably good numbers, because that's their formula. Play loose and free, play offensive, score a bunch of goals, and hopefully your goaltenders can shore up the back end. Now, timeout. When we come back, what's ahead for the Buffalo Sabres, including a meeting with a couple more really good teams? That's up ahead on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Could score 50 goals, could hoist the Stanley Cup, could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper, our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey. Because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash daily fantasy hockey contests. Check out, what players you might like to go over a certain amount of goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game, more or less than the Sleeper projections. And to win big, you have to predict the outcome of 8 player stats. Use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You're going to have to do a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres are off Friday. They did practice. No changes to the lines. Still looks like Tyson Jost and Eric Robinson will be healthy scratches again, which is not surprising when they're fully healthy. Zemgus Girgensons back at practice. He's also an extra, not ready to return. Not sure he would go back into the lineup either. Saturday night, 7:30 against the New York Rangers is what is next up for the Buffalo Sabres. This is an ESPN Plus game, Madison Square Garden. In fact, what's funny, this is just complete coincidence, I guess. 4 Sabre games in a row are going to be either nationally streamed or nationally televised. It goes ESPN Plus, TNT, ESPN Plus, ESPN Plus. Those are the next 4 games for the Sabres, beginning with Saturday night at the Rangers. The Sabres, a big underdog against the Rangers, but reminder that it was only a few weeks ago the Sabres went to Madison Square Garden and beat the Rangers 5-1 in what was maybe their most impressive performance of the season. Probably have to be second now. They did just score 9 on Toronto. So Luukkonen looks like he's going to be between the pipes, and they're going to be playing a great team, but they've played really well against great teams. They will have to do that again Wednesday night, the 27th. That's a TNT game. 7:30 again, hosting Boston before 30th and 31st going home Columbus. They get a rematch there, and then at Ottawa. So the next 2 games, if they want to put together a 3-game win streak, hey, the way this team would do that, knowing this team the way we do so far, if they go on a 3-game win streak, it's going to be Toronto, the Rangers, and the Bruins. That's just the way they're weird. That's the way they're going to do it. They're going to do it when you least expect it. So I give them a puncher's chance to beat the Rangers on Saturday night and then carry that momentum into playing Boston on Wednesday, 2 teams that they've just recently beat and beat well. So that's what's coming up for the Sabres. Zemgus Girgensons. I just kind of mentioned this in passing. It sounds like he's going to be ready to return maybe within a week or maybe a week and a half. And I just don't know where you put him. I think the Sabres right now, as presently constructed, is maybe what you want to keep going with when everybody's healthy, with one exception. I do think it's got to be coming up on time to move on from Victor Olofsson. We've said it a million times, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but he's on the fourth line right now with Peyton Krebs and Kyle Okposo, a line that doesn't really make sense for him. And maybe I shouldn't keep saying this, that, hey, you could trade him for blank and blank. Maybe there's just no trade market. I mean, if there wasn't a trade market, this is kind of how it would go. But I think when everyone's healthy, maybe Zemgus goes in for Olofsson, and maybe Robinson too, to maybe you just rotate all four of those guys around. But everybody else, like, nobody else is coming out of the lineup. Krebs is not coming out. Oposo's not coming out. Middlestat, Greenway, Benson, Quinn, Peterka. None of those guys are coming out. So there's feels like there's one forward job that's truly available right now for four players: Olofsson, Robinson, Jost, and Girgensons. By the way, Ryan Johnson looks like he'll stay in the lineup on Saturday, and Henry Jokiharju will again be a healthy scratch. Did I jinx Henry Jokiharju? I apologize to him if I did. I did a show a week ago on how he's having his best season as a Sabre, and he's really looking like a true top four defenseman. And he was pretty bad in the next two games after that, and then found himself in the press box and is going to be again. So I might have jinxed that one, and I'm sorry to everybody involved if that's how it went. Thanks for listening today to the Locked On Sabres podcast. We will be back after Sabres and Rangers, so hopefully you enjoy that one. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, and we'll talk to you after Christmas. So we'll be back on Tuesday, the 26th, will be our next show. We'll probably record on Christmas night, so there'll be a chance that I drop the episode maybe before midnight, but at the very least, it'll be late on Christmas night. But otherwise, the 26th. Thanks for listening today to the Locked On Sabres podcast. And be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, covering the top stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Talk to you next time here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.